David Brewster here with Late Night Lessons, and here's a lesson called Chordplay, the Chords of Pink Floyd. Now, Chordplay is a series of lessons that I came up with and kind of used with private lesson students over the years, and then since that time, I've kind of refined it and applied the concept to, famous bands and famous guitarists and famous songs, and kind of mined some of those groups and songs to find, unusual chords and interesting chord progressions and interesting voicings. And, once you kind of put down, the idea of, okay, I'm going to learn this song, then the next step would be kind of like, well, what can I learn from this song, or what can I take away from this composition that somebody else made? And, there's nothing wrong with copying a song or copying a guitar player and learning something, note for note. But there comes a time when you kind of need to learn how to, fend for yourself and write your own music and kind of, be creative and playful with this. Because I have noticed a lot of people out there that are very rigid and very, cut and dry with what they practice and their practice habits. And I'm very laid back. I'm really loose. I'm creative and playful, and I use my imagination a lot when I'm writing or just kind of jamming or whatever. I love to improvise. I love spontaneous moments of music and so with this in mind, chord play really is kind of a chance for you to kind of play around, with chords and play around with music, and it kind of takes some of the pressure off. Like, you don't have to necessarily play the song, or you don't have to necessarily write a song, but you're just kind of playing with elements of music and, chords, chord voicings, chord progressions, and just kind of getting your hands dirty, really with the style or influence, from another musician. All right, the first song I selected in the first example in this lesson comes from the song Shine On You Crazy Diamond, which is found on the album Wish You Were Here. And the song itself is broken up into multiple parts, where it's almost like a symphony, but it's sprinkled throughout that album, where you have part one, and then you have part two, and then it just kind of moves as the album moves along. And it changes, and it's a very interesting piece of music. But this would be from the first section after that, wicked guitar solo in the beginning. And I guess this would be kind of the signature chord of at least that section of the song. And I know the first time I ever heard this song, and the first time I heard that chord, I was just like, what is that? My ears were not used to the tonality, that spacious, dreamy sound. I was used to like power chords, Van Halen and Sabbath and Kiss and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden I heard Pink Floyd and I was like, what? What is that? And I loved it, but I was very confused by it because it wasn't Judas Priest. It was obviously something very different. And so anyway, what we're going to look at here, it's a G minor 13, and it's played in a very unusual way. We're going to have two fretted notes and two open strings. So we've got the 8th fret on the D, the 6th fret on the B, and then the open G and the open high E. So if I just pick through it, you'll hear the chord, but it's not going to sound the way that you're accustomed to it. It doesn't really sound the way you're accustomed to hearing it. Well, what we're going to do is I'm going to play the two fretted notes first and then the two open strings. And if I do that, you're going to recognize this as Shine On You Crazy Diamond. Now, like I said, when I first heard that, I was like, what in the world is that? Very tense, very, monster movie kind of sound. Right at home, like with a Buckethead album or something. Buckethead probably has an entire, catalog of chords like that. But, so it's a G minor 13, played and voiced in a really unusual way with the open strings. I love it though. I mean, I'm not complaining. That's an amazing sound. I love it. But what if we took that chord and just played it in a more traditional voicing, like say something like this, right? Now, when I hear that, my ear doesn't really hear this spacey outer space monster sound. Now I'm almost kind of hearing like this funky, kind of jazzy thing. So I think it's really cool to, locate a chord like this and then start to find, other ways to kind of plan with it. All right, next up we have the song Breathe, which is the opening track from Dark Side of the Moon, arguably, Pink Floyd's most popular album. One of the most popular albums ever recorded and released. That's worldwide. So, yeah, this is a huge, huge song. Anybody that's ever heard the album Dark Side of the Moon, I mean, it's that first, that opening track. So when you hear Breathe, there's something unusual happening with the first chord, but then when you hear the second chord, the progression between the two kind of creates this interesting thing. So the first chord is an E minor 9. Sorry, E minor add 9. Right? Very, almost kind of flamenco, very exotic chord. Now, it's going to change, and it basically goes to A major, but he also kind of flirts with A7. Right? So there's the E minor add 9. Here's the A major, and a little bit of A7. And you'll definitely hear him playing with that, like with the little fills. Really all he's doing there is just finding, there's an A7, and he really just slid from the 12th fret into the A7 up here an octave higher. And you can basically find those sixths all over the place, but I love the sound of those chords where you've got all those open strings. And that's a really good shape to kind of play with. Discover, some different voicings and unusual sounds just playing with that shape. And this is literally chord play in action. We're just playing around. I'm not even really worried about what chord this is. I'm just looking for interesting sounds, something different. And if I find something I like, then I'll take the time and sit there and analyze it and go, oh, okay. And the reason that has such an unusual sound, the chords are cool, I mean, the A7's not really that exciting. I mean, it's an A7 chord, or just stock A major. But it's the blend of the E minor add 9 to the A7. It's that, the voicing and kind of the voice leading between the chords. And really what's happening there is we have a minor 1 chord, which is the E minor add 9, and then we have a major 4 chord. Okay? So if you're not really sure what that means, this chord progression is implying Dorian. Like that is the calling card of the Dorian mode, the Dorian tonality. A major 1, a minor 1 to a major 4, that's a red flag. Dorian, Dorian, Dorian all day long. And, with the dreamy kind of slow aspect of the song, it's a little hard, to kind of pick out exactly what's going on there. But if you're curious about this, another, famous song that you may have heard, right around the same era, definitely a little bit before Dark Side of the Moon. But Carlos Santana, the song Oyo Como Va, basically that's a Dorian playground. That's a song that I use with students all the time just to explore, some Dorian tonality and introducing, the sound of that mode. So Oyo Como Va has an A minor 7 to a D9. It's a minor 1 to a major 4, but that creates this really different sound. Right? Same thing with Breathe by Pink Floyd. Just a lot slower. We don't have the funky, kind of Latin groove. We've got this spacey, kind of British, space travel thing happening, which is amazing. But that's exactly what it makes us think of. It just sounds like you're floating in space. But that's technically what's going on behind the scenes. Okay, the last example here is another very popular song from Pink Floyd. This is from Us and Them, which is also from Dark Side of the Moon. And the chords being played with here, there's a D sus2, right? And then that moves up to an E sus2 over D. The E sus2 over D is a slash chord. Now, I'm not talking about Guns N' Roses and Top Hats. I'm talking about a slash chord. It's an E sus2 slash D. Which that really just means the top part of the chord is an E sus2, and the lowest note of the chord is now suddenly that droning D string. Now, if I just play those two chords back and forth, and you kind of think of Us and Them, and you can kind of hear it, but then, you definitely need to pick through it. Just to kind of get an idea of the way that song was played. And those are the first two shapes. Of course, it keeps going, and find some really cool chords hiding in that song. Well, what we're gonna do is just kind of investigate, what that full chord actually is. Now, this is D sus2, but there's another voicing right here. It's very, very useful. That's also a really good shape if you're still having trouble barring. That's a great bar chord exercise and kind of challenge for that fret hand, because you're technically holding, you're holding 5 strings, but you're only fretting and sounding 3 of those notes. But it's the lowest note and the top 2 notes, right? So it's a good, it's definitely a good bar chord, challenge. Now, as soon as I hear that, like my ear, of course, I'm pretty random in the head, so my ear hears a song that I normally hear like in the dentist office or an elevator or like at the grocery store, and I don't know why. I don't know why when I hear a sus2 chord, that's the first thing that usually pops in my head. But if we move that up a half step, the 80s song Don't Dream It's Over by Crowded House, that's the first thing my ear hears when I hear that chord. And I'm also hearing some Van Halen big time, because Eddie loves those chords. So that's it for this lesson. And if you really want to dive into the chords of Pink Floyd, I really just looked at one song from the album Wish You Were Here, 2 songs from Dark Side of the Moon. So I didn't even get into metal, I didn't get into Animals, I didn't get into really, anything crazy. I didn't look at anything from The Wall either. So anyway, totally going off on a tangent here. Check out the lesson, check out the chords, let me know what you think. If you have any trouble, definitely, send me a message or leave me some comments and I can clear up any confusion you might have. But that's Chordplay, and in the future I'll add some more lessons to this series. It might just be static chords, it might be chords related to a certain band or guitarist. Who knows? Whatever I'm feeling that day when I put it together, that's what it's going to be. So, anyway, but thanks for checking this video out, and hopefully you got something from it, and there will be more to follow this. So, thank you, and rock on.